Good morning, good morning, good morning. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, part 4 of the book of Esther. We are on part 4, and this will wrap it up officially for the end of Esther. Alright, good deal. Alright, let's go ahead and begin. I actually have this quote here. Francis Bacon, none other, says, "Why should I get angry for loving himself better than me?" Right, well, this is a great correlation. This is something, maybe a question that Haman. Alright, it's very clear that Queen Esther and Mordecai, they love themselves and they love their people. And it is actually a known fact that if you love yourself, you will easier love others and care for others and look out for others. Alright, if you love yourself first, loving others becomes very easy. And in this case, Haman is the angry man who is getting upset at Mordecai for loving himself, looking after himself and his people. And if he were to subdue that anger, if he were to subdue those jealous feelings, those vengeful feelings, he would have had a lot more success in whatever he wanted to endeavor. Okay, but his ego and his pride was just too great and too large. It grew up on him like a mountain and completely took over his spirit and his soul. So here we have the second feast that Queen Esther is hosting. She didn't want to bring it up during the first feast. She wanted to go for round 2 and bring up the issues that were coming about between the Jewish people and this realm, this nation. So the king, and Haman went to Queen Esther's banquet. As they were drinking wine on the second day, the king asked, "Queen Esther, what is your petition? It will be given to you, if it was half of the kingdom." Then Queen Esther answered, "For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king." And then King Xerxes becomes confused. So it's a little bit unclear whether he was privy to this notion that Haman was trying to spread about, right? They sent out the couriers, they sent out the large messages, but I think he was unaware in a sense. He was kind of leading blindly with Haman at his side. I think he was unaware of the actual disaster and the annihilation that was decreed. He did give Haman permission, being like, yes, do what you will with the people, but I don't think he had it in his head that they were actually going to be killed or killed off. So King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, who is he? Where is he? The man who has dared to do such a thing. At this time as well, the Queen Esther did not even tell the king that she was Jewish. So I don't think that he made that connection at all. Not that it would have been so much of a problem, because Mordecai was Jewish, and we know that the king didn't have a big issue. I'm also wondering at this time if this took place before King Xerxes was working on building the gates of Judah and Jerusalem, or if this was after. It seems like this took place beforehand, in King Xerxes' younger years and the beginning of his reign, but I'm not for certain. But Esther replied, "An adversary, an enemy, this vile Haman." Then Haman was terrified before the king and the queen. He was not expecting this to come about on the banquet. He was expecting to be honored. And the king got up in rage. He left his wine and went out into the palace garden. But Haman, realizing that the king had already decided his fate, stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. Right, so again, there's kind of a blind leadership going on, letting Haman just do what he wants, When the king realized that he was doing something so vile, the king at this point had a lot to think about, obviously, because he didn't know Esther was Jewish. Again, not that it was really an issue for him, but there was something going on right under his nose that caused offense to him, because this was a great and terrible decree that had taken place. So he wanted to go ahead and make right all of his prior wrongs with this previous decree. And it says here, King Xerxes replied to Queen Esther and to Mordecai the Jew, "Because Haman attacked the Jews, I have given his estate to Esther, and they have impaled him on the pole set up." So they actually did impale Haman. Okay, he says, "Now write another decree in the king's name in behalf of the Jews, as it seems best for you, and seal it with the king's signet ring. For no document written in the king's name and sealed with this ring can be revoked. In every province and in every city to which the edict came, there was joy and gladness among the Jews, with feasting and celebrating. And many of the people of other nationalities became Jews because fear of the Jews had seized them." All right, so Judaism, right, is not always a nationality, not always a race, not always a group of people, right? It's also a religion and a way of life. So we had actual other people coming and joining this religion and this way of life. Also, it can happen through marriage and adoption. People can be adopted into families to become Jewish. It's not always about a strict nationality. So, with the sword, killing and destroying. Let me fix this real quick, you guys. I told myself I might need my Bible with me, because not that there's some errors, but there's some errors. Let me fix here, line 5, chapter 9. Line 5, chapter 9. Okay, now we have a bit of a retaliation. Okay, retaliation and uprising, if you will. The Jews struck down all their enemies with the sword, killing and destroying them. They did what they pleased to those who hated them. They also killed Parshanatha, Dalphon, Aspatha, among the other 10 sons of Haman, son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews. But they did not lay a hand on the plunder. Okay, so this was a defining way of the Israelites, right? They would go ahead and destroy to go ahead and seek that justice, right, that was allocated to them. But they would never take the plunder. This was something that defined them and kept their morals in the right place when taking over or annihilating a people. Okay. This happened on the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th day they rested and made it a day of feasting and joy. So the Jews agreed to continue the celebration that they had begun, doing what Mordecai had written to them. For Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of all Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast the pur, that is the lot, remember that, for their ruin and destruction. Therefore, these days were called Purim, for the word pure, because everything written in this letter, because of what they had seen and what had happened to them, the Jews took it on themselves to establish the custom that they and their descendants and all who joined them should without fail observe these 2 days every year, in the way prescribed and at the time appointed. Okay, so this is where we get the holiday Purim. Okay, it is, I believe, March, right here when it says March 13th and 14th. January, February, March. Yeah, so that is the holiday Purim, March 13th and 14th, and this is where it comes from. So if you have Jewish friends and relatives, You're celebrating Purim. This is where it arises from, this book of Esther here, during the reign of King Xerxes and the dastardly downfall of King Haman. I shouldn't say king. There's no such thing as two kings. Right-hand man, Haman. So, great. This is it. There was a little bit of an uprising, a little bit of a violence to go ahead and just reestablish the dominance that is the Jewish people. Okay, we're talking about, yes, they love themselves to love and help others, but in order to make sure that everybody was protected and safe from hate crimes, essentially, they had to go ahead and do what was needed to be done. So, great, you guys, that is the end of Esther. When I was reading this in the past, I was a lot more heavy-minded, and I think, I remember some details that were, I feel like they're not here anymore. I don't know what it is that made me switch gears on this so much, but it's actually a very short, simple, and to-the-point book. And we're going to go on a bit of a roller coaster after this with the book of Job. And after we finish Job, we finally have arrived at the book of Psalms, which is great. And that kind of gives you a good literal meeting point, middle point to tell you that we are making very, very great progress. But let's see, Job, I have a feeling it's going to just be an emotional up and down. One day it's good, one day it's bad kind of story from what I remember. So we're going to go ahead and read that next, and we'll look forward to it. I appreciate you guys listening on my storytelling and our learning experience today, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.